is in relation to Lord Ramachandra's activities, the Ramayana. And it was my choice. I selected this topic, Vibhishan's surrender. Lord Ram accepted Vibhishan's surrender at Tirupalani. Tirupalani is a place that we visited during one of our South India yatras. And it's a celebrated place, just called the place of surrender. And the painting shows floating in the sky up there with his palms folded is Vibhishan. Behind him, there are Vibhishan's 4 ministers. And of course, next to Ram is Lakshman. And Sugriva, I assume it's the monkey with the beard because he's a little elder. And some other monkey, not necessarily Hanuman, but also receiving Vibhishan's surrender. It's a very nice place. Those of you that may have visited or have the opportunity to visit Tirupalani, I'm sure you'll like it. The mood of the place, the Leela of the place is where others also surrendered to Lord Ramachandra, and Lord Ramachandra accepted their surrender. So I'm going to go back to an earlier stage of the Ramayana, specifically Govindaraja's commentary on Balakanda. The history of Sri Vaishnavism has an interesting portion. We'll take a look. Jamunacharya, who was the guru of Ramanujacharya, extensively studied and wrote on Ramayana, and he gave those extensive teachings to Sri Shailapurna. And Sri Shailapurna gave those teachings to Ramanujacharya. It's a wonderful story of how that happened. And then following Ramanujacharya, the 8 cardinal teachings of Ramayana, and of course expanded besides just a list of 18 teachings, were passed on in disciplic succession. And Govindaraja is in that disciplic succession. And in the commentary of the 5th Sarga of Balakanda, he spells them out, these 18 cardinal teachings. Now, who is Govindaraja? Many, those of from ISKCON at least, may not have heard of him. Sometime, the time of his life is not clear, but scholars have ranged it from 1227 to 1500 AD. He was in Tirumala, and he was instructed in a dream by Balaji to write a commentary on Ramayana. He was a very gifted scholar and very learned in the scripture and learning the teachings, and incredibly humble. So in his introduction to this Ramayana commentary, he says, I've not written anything original. I've just gathered from previous teachers. Of course, the previous teachers go back several centuries. But his commentary is most celebrated as comprehensive of all the commentaries of Valmiki Ramayana. And in these 18 cardinal teachings, very central is the teaching of Sharanagati. In fact, in general, the Sri Vaishnavacharyas accept Ramayana is a treatise on Sharanagati. I'll say it again. Ramayana is a treatise on Sharanagati. Sharanagati is a teaching, and how to do it is illustrated profoundly and profusely in Ramayana. So therefore, Vibhishan surrender is the topic that I selected as a very exemplary of the whole of the Ramayana, the life of Lord Ramachandra. In the life of Lord Ramachandra came when the demigods appealed to Vishnu, appealed to Brahma, and Brahma appealed to Vishnu to please appear on earth in human form to check Ravana and the Rakshasa race because they had received boons, benedictions from Brahma, that they were unstoppable. Vishnu had to personally come. A little bit about Ravana. How do we speak about Ramayana without speaking about Ravana? Ravana, his name previous to Ravana was Dasa Griva, because he had 10 grivas, or 10 necks, or 10 heads. And the name Ravana was given to him by Lord Shiva because of a pastime I'm sure you're well aware of. When Ravana, who's pictured down below, went to Mount Kailash and wanted to see Lord Shiva, he was checked by Nandi, and he insulted Nandi, and he insulted Lord Shiva, and he started to pick up the whole of Mount Kailash with his 20 arms, and Lord Shiva simply placed his big toe on the mountain and crushed the arms of Ravana. And Ravana, having been born in a Brahmin family, or of a Brahmin father, at least, we'll see that shortly. He had much learning in the Vedas, and he knew many stories or songs and hymns from the Vedas. So he sang them for 100 years. And Lord Shiva became pleased with his supplication. He lifted his toe. Ravana removed his 20 arms, and he was roaring in pain. Thus the name Ravana was given. And he had a brother, or a stepbrother, who later became Kuvera, and his name was Vaishravana. Instead of roaring terribly, it was hearing distinctly. Here's the family line, the lineage. There's Brahma at the very top. And one of the sons of Brahma was named Palastya Muni. Palastya Muni became married to the daughter of another sage, Trinabandhu. And from their combination, Vishrava, very, very capable, very, very saintly personality was born. He later became married to the daughter of Bharadwaj Muni, and Vaishravana was their son. And later, without the details because of time, he earned the position or the title of the treasure of heaven, Kuvera. Now, I don't know how much time I'll have because an hour passes quickly. It's already 15 minutes into the hour. There was a second wife, Kai Kashi. Kai Kashi, as you see here in the chart, I hope you can see in the chart. Is it clear on your screen there? And okay, good. She was the daughter of two Rakshasas, Rakshasa and Rakshasi, Sumali. Now there's a very detailed story, Sumali, and how it came to be that he was married to Ketumati. But Sumali wanted to have a son that would overrule or surpass Vaishravana or Kuvera. And so he, Sumali, sent his daughter to the ashram of Vaishravana to proposed to him that this daughter, unmarried girl, Kaikashi, be accepted as his wife. So it's a very detailed explanation, but because of time, Kaikashi went to his ashram. She stood very humbly, very meekly, looking down, not looking directly at the sage. And he asked why she had come. And she said, "You're all knowing, you know why I've come." And he responded, I'll accept you as a wife. However, you've come at an inauspicious time, and therefore the sons that will be born of you will be Rakshasas. And she said, "Oh no, I don't want sons like that." And he said, "Well, a concession is your youngest son will be very famous as a pious man." So you see below, here's the four sons. The eldest firstborn son was Dasagriva, who later became Ravana. And there were two other brothers, Kumbhakarna and Vibhishana. And Shurpanaka was the fourth child of this combination of these two. That the two is Kaikashi, that's his mother, Ravana's mother, and Vishrava. So Vishrava was a great Brahmin, and so when Dasagriva was young, he also studied the Vedas, as did Kumbhakarna. He knew the Vedas and the codes of the Vedas, but Vibhishan had special interest. Let's just see. Here's what Vishrava said to his prospective wife, Kaikashi. The youngest son will become famous as a pious man. So when the young three boys became old enough to go to the forest and engage in austerities to please Brahma, we know what Ravana's request was. And Kumbhakarna's request was that he could sleep a long time. And Vibhishan's request was that he would become qualified to be a great devotee of the Lord and undisturbed. As a young man, he engaged in study. And here's what Brahma said to Vibhishan. You may accept the benediction from me according to your desire. So Kumbhakarna wanted, Ravana wanted. Here's what Vibhishan, straight from Valmiki Ramayana. My dear Lord, since you are pleased with me, the goal of my life has already been achieved. My only wish is that my mind may always remain steadily fixed upon the path of virtue, even amidst the greatest of difficulties. And sure enough, he had great difficulties, being the younger brother of Ravana. But the reason for presenting all of this for, preliminary is we don't hear about Vibhishan until much later, but the ground has been set that he'll become famous as a pious man. He engaged himself in the natural proclivity of studying the Vedas, and he wanted, his one desire was to become fixed upon the path of virtue, even amidst the greatest of difficulties. He was a devotee. When he was engaged in the service of his elder brother, Ravana, in Lanka, he had four ministers who were like him, virtuous, fixed in religious principle, quite, different than the rest of the Lanka residents. In Valmiki Ramayana, we don't hear about him until his departing the assembly of Ravan. But in one of the Ramayanas, it indicates, and here's a painting to illustrate, Hanuman met Vibhishan. Now we know that Hanuman had the capacity to assume whatever forms he chose. For example, when he first met Ram and Lakshman, he was in the form of a mendicant Brahmin. So here we see him looking like a Brahmana meeting Vibhishan. And according to one particular Ramayana, this meeting, he went to Vibhishan's home after his exchange with Sita in the Ashok grove or garden, and then before he went to destroy uh, the soldiers and wreak havoc to give a very strong signal to Ravana and his soldiers he's in for big trouble. So it's not a primary reference from Valmiki Ramayana at least, but this is another reference to Vibhishan. And when Hanuman decided, after consoling Sita and making that part of his mission successful, he wanted to do more than that. He wanted to strike fear into the hearts of the Rakshasas, and he also wanted to do some spying, some reconnaissance work to see where everything was inside the city of Lanka, so he could refer that back to Ram for war purposes. So you know what he did. He broke off an iron rod and started smashing everything. And when that happened, generals were sent. He destroyed the generals. Thousands of Ravana's soldiers then went to attack Hanuman, including the powerful demon Jambumali. And here's a very ancient painting where Hanuman is destroying Jambumali. He looks like a demon falling off his horse. So finally, Indrajit was sent with his mystic power. He was able to tie up Hanuman with ropes, but unfortunately, the Shakti weapon of Indrajit lost its power due to the ropes used by the Rakshasas. Hanuman played along with the whole routine because he wanted to come directly before Ravana, see him, assess him, so he could give that report to Ram. And after insulted in so many ways by Ravana with the plan to kill him, he spoke very, 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 very strongly, fearlessly, in repudiation of the vile activity of Ravan in kidnapping Sita, and advised him strongly to return Sita or he would be destroyed and the whole Rakshasa race would be destroyed. Hanuman was the object of Ravan's rage. He wanted to kill him. Vibhishan intervened. It said that's not according to scripture. You don't kill a messenger. You can appropriately give some punishment, but you can't kill them. And so Ravan accepted that advice by Vibhishan, and it was decided to, as you know, put his tail on fire because monkeys have a lot of appreciation for their tail. So they soaked some rags in oil and lit the rags and tied the rags. And Hanuman then expanded his body, broke the ropes, and the rest is history. He set the entire city of Lanka on fire and rose up in the air and warned them again very soon, I'm just one monkey. How much power you see in me. And there's thousands and thousands and thousands, unlimited numbers of powerful soldiers like me, and your city will all be destroyed. There's a nice painting I like. He's sitting by the side of the sea, looking at the emblazed capital city of Lanka. Looks like he's got his tail dangling in the edge of the water there, cooling out before he goes back to inform Ram of what has happened and his finding Sita and the whole story. So after Hanuman leaves, we find Vibhishan coming into the picture again, because it caught Ravana and all the Rakshasas by complete surprise. So he called his ministers. And what did the ministers do? Well, they gave bad advice. Their first was they eulogized their strength. You see up at the top of this very old painting, that's Ravana with his so many arms and heads, his ministers before him, and different features of the painting. or showing different things, rakshasas here and there. So they said, no worries, we'll take care of everything. Uh, in the midst of all of this, uh, the maternal grandfather, so maternal means his mother's father, Malyavan, entered into the assembly and gave advice, similar advice as Hanuman had done, that he should return Sita to Ram. And this would bring an end to the whole problem that they're faced. And if not, that they would be annihilated. Ravana disregarded his words. He didn't rebuke him, but Malyavan just left the assembly, knowing what the outcome would be. Now, because of the limited time, Vibhishan tried in this particular circumstance 3 times. At this assembly, he tried to persuade his good brother or his elder brother, Ravan, to uh, don't take rash action, consider carefully what he's doing. If the one stroke can be done to returning Sita, then everything could be solved. Ravana dismissed the assembly and went to his chambers. Later, early the next morning, Vibhishan tried again. Vibhishan was at this time now rebuked by Ravana, and then the assembly was called during the day, and Ravana didn't like at all what Vibhishan had to say. In one version of Ramayana, he kicked him and insulted him and said, if you weren't my brother, I would slay you immediately. You're part of the enemy and you're finished. So with that, according to Valmiki Ramayana, he, Vibhishan, had mystic power, and he just rose in the air from the assembly and left. And where did he go to? Followed by his 4 ministers, he went directly to Tirupalani, or the place where Lord Ramachandra was. By this time, Hanuman had returned, and Ram had made it to the shore of the sea. As you see in the painting, there's on the left side, there's Ram and Lakshman. In the middle, there's Vibhishan offering his obeisances, and standing behind him, looking kind of funny, those are those 4 ministers. And here and there are the Vanaras, the protectors of Ram, as if he needed protection. So now here we are with the same image you saw at the beginning. There's Vibhishan, and he had the wisdom as a administrator to not directly come before Ram. Rather, he approached the representatives of Ram, starting with Sugriva, because they greeted him, and sent them to make the request on his behalf for Ram to accept his surrender. And what did Ram do? Well, Ram did what kings do. The kings, before making a decision, they would consult their ministers. And the ministers, of course, were also soldiers. And one by one, they all had some differing opinion, as individuals will have differing opinions. So Griva was the most suspicious and said, some very heavy things, bad things. He's a spy. He knows he's going to lose. And so he's come here because he wants to become the next king, because he's the younger brother. And it's just ambition driven. And as he's left his brother, maybe he'll leave you. And who can say, I don't trust him. And so different things were said. It's very elaborate description of what different personalities said. And everyone was silent. Everyone was vocal, except when Hanuman was called upon. And Hanuman is the only one who accepted him. And he had some very simple points. Um, even if he's ambitious, Ram doesn't mind. Someone takes shelter of him, he'll accept him. And it's natural that he wants to be a proper king because he's a virtuous man. Then he said, I can see by his countenance. You judge a man by his face, or his mind is, the face is the index to the mind. And I can see he's virtuous. I trust him. And Ram would not like some kind of trial period or check him out or any of those things. He knows him very well. And I know my Lord Ram, and he has already accepted him. That was his conclusion. Here's another very old painting. On the left-hand side of the painting, you see Vibhishan and his four ministers. And on the right-hand side, you see Ram and Lakshman and a whole host of Vanaras. And it's presumably the bear there that's Jambavan. So they're ready to do whatever Ram says. In this section, Ram indicates that he's willing to accept Vibhishan's surrender. Sugriva boldly still vocalizes, well, wait, what about this and that? What about the other thing? And this very famous, celebrated statement comes in this section where Ram says, it's my eternal principle that if any living being takes shelter of me, even once, saying, I am yours, freedom from all fear. Again, it is my eternal principle that if any living being takes shelter of me even once, saying, I am yours, then I award that person freedom from all fear. Now, this statement turns out to be a very critical statement in the Sri Sampradaya, because, as many of you know, there was a dispute in the succession following Ramanujacharya whether the process of prapati, is it a one-time deal or is it an ongoing process? This is the Sharanagati question. Taking shelter even once, you receive Diksha, you take shelter once, that's it. Back to Vaikuntha, because Ram made this promise. Now he says, I will award that person freedom from all fear, and Vaikuntha is a place where there's no fear, right?
Hare Krishna, Akhilesh Prabhu. We are not able to hear.
Looks like it got disconnected.
Yeah.
No, it's connected. It just this is I'm on it.
Screen frozen. Akhilesh, are you checking?
Yes, I'm checking.
Okay.
Giving me shelter. So in one sense, this is one is negative, the other is positive, but you could have the negative without the positive. Ananya gati tvam. My exclusive shelter is Lord Ramachandra. My exclusive shelter is Lord Vishnu. My exclusive shelter is Krishna. And I have no other shelter. That's the side of the Sharanagata, the one who's taking shelter. Now, what's the qualification of the one who one is taking shelter of? That's called the Sharanya. This is nice word. Saralata. Saralata is he gives shelter to anyone without consideration of who they are. I could spend a lot of time on this saralata. This is a word that Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur uses in describing the foremost quality of a brahmana. What's the foremost quality of a brahmana? Sarala. What's that simplicity? What's simplicity?
Hare Krishna devotees. Looks like some technical issue. They're working on it.
Prabhuji, it seems that YouTube video is working, so I think I put the link, but I think they also had some difficulty. But the link is back up.
YouTube working, Zoom is not working, Prabhu.
Oh, I think now the other restream is back, but it's on mute. But
Yam,
the YouTube video works perfectly.
Ishitakshyam.
Okay.
Bhayam is fear. And one will have fear as long as one is absorbed in the bodily conception of life. Say it again. As long as you have the bodily conception of life, you're going to have fear. It's just part of having, so fearing, eating, sleeping, mating, and fearing. Having a body, there's fear. So what do you do? How do you become fearless? Get rid of your body, get out a paring knife and scrape it off, and you don't have a body anymore. Now you're fearless. It's identification with the body. It's absorption in the bodily conception of life. What Ram is saying to make someone fearless is he will relieve them from that false egoistic conception of thinking of the self in terms of the body, the covering, the body, and the mind, because mind is also a covering. How we can become fearless is right on the screen. You don't have some other shelter, and the Lord becomes your only shelter. Ananya Gati. Gati means goal or destination, or in this case, it's shelter. No other shelter. So you take full shelter of the one with no other shelters. In the morning classes, we've been reading Uddhava Gita. Uddhava Gita is, of course, spoken by Krishna to Uddhava. It could say Bhagavad Gita Part 2 because it's Bhagavan speaking. But it's Uddhava Gita because he asks all these nice questions. And the sense of the first 3 chapters of Uddhava Gita is the same as this, what you see on the screen. That is letting go of other shelters. That is attachment to the sources of misery. Not misery, but the sources of misery. What's the source of misery? Attachment to the temporary. The affinity of trying to be the enjoyer of the temporary, and thus attachment. Because I want to enjoy. And that's my field of enjoyment. So attached to the idea of trying to squeeze some pleasure out of the temporary. Now, when Vibhishan left, we find out that Vibhishan didn't even say Hari Bol to his wife. He didn't say, I'm leaving to go take shelter of Ram. His wife was okay. His wife was exalted like he was. She understood. She was safe. She was protected. She became the future queen as he became the future king. As after Lord Ramachandra accepted, here's the image, Lord Ramachandra accepted Vibhishan with everyone surrounding. His ministers were also accepted. The Lakshman accepted, everyone accepted. He even went further as to crown Vibhishan the king right there in Tirupalani. A full consecration. You're the next king. Even before Ravana is dead, it was already established. It was done again later, but it was already an accepted fact. Ram had no interest in the kingdom. Ram had interest in virtue. And here's a suitable person, a virtuous person, who was dutifully in the service of his brother, but fearlessly, and one could say foolishly, but fearlessly speaking the truth, virtuous truth to his brother. And virtuous truth to a person like Ravana just makes them angry. Sure enough, he became very angry at hearing the truth. He didn't hear it from so many people.
Okay. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Ad-
Hare Krishna devotee. Looks like some issue and they are working on it. Hare Krishna devotees, sorry for inconvenience. In 1 or 2 minutes, we will have Kirtan. Till the time we get fixed that Maharaj lecture.
Starting, Prabhu.
Sure, Mataji. Thank you.
Yeah. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Bhagavad conception of life are those three: prasanatma, happiness within; neither hankering nor lamenting, that's the second; and seeing other living entities equally. Samak sarveshu bhuteshu. Those are symptoms or qualities by which we can gauge or measure how free we are from the bodily conception of life. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much, Maharaj. Yes.
Maharaj, there is a question online. How did Vibhishana get motivated to take complete shelter? Is it Prarabdha or Guru?
Well, the seed came from association, we can say, came from association with Brahma, and even before that was the seed from his father, because during his childhood he was studying the Vedas. It doesn't give details, but his father was a great devotee, a great sadhu, a great sage, but also a devotee. And so we can assume from his father, from Brahma, the seed was there, and it grew because he, presumably, we don't hear the detail, but he continued with the practices of a sadhu to nourish the seed. So it came from higher, bhakti comes from a higher position, not just from the sky.
Hare Krishna devotees in Austin. Please, if you have any questions, please raise your hand.
There's something in the room here.
What are the practical ways of, or practical manifestations of quality of?
What are the practical manifestations of surrender? That's your question?
Of saralta, simplicity.
Simplicity.
Simplicity, yes.
The characteristics of simplicity, or how to, which?
in our practical day-to-day dealings, how does it reflect? For example, one of
How does simplicity reflect?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a nice question. There's the simplicity of the Devakta, and there's, at least in this case, the simplicity of the Supreme Lord. The simplicity of the Supreme Lord we see on the screen here. Yes. To anyone without consideration, he gives shelter. That means there's no prior material qualification, no material disqualification. That's from the Supreme Lord side. That's his simplicity. And from our side, the simplicity is, using Bhaktisiddhanta's language, straightforwardness. He says, he writes, the saralata of a devotee or of a jiva is they're straightforward. No duplicity. The opposite is duplicity. Or when in speaking, you speak the truth. Certainly that's, exemplified by Ram. He never deviated from the truth. The example given by Bhaktisiddhanta in his writing is the young boy who wanted to become the disciple of Gautama, and Gautama wanted to know what's your gotra. So he went to his mother, and his mother said, I don't know who your father is. So you're just say you're Satyakama Jabala. Satyakama Jabala. So he told the whole story to Gautama, and Gautama said, I accept you, because only one who's saralata or simple could speak this, because it's too embarrassing. So I accept you. And then gave the instruction, never depart from the truth. Gave him some service, never depart from the truth. That's the simplicity example given by Bhaktisiddhanta for us. That's a quality of a Brahmana. Now, a quality of a Vaishnava is Krishna is our shelter. That's the para satyam, param satyam. That's our position. The supreme shelter is the personality of Godhead, and we don't deviate from that. That's our simplicity. That's how it manifests. So it goes back to the first list. If I have other shelters, then that's not my exclusive shelter. And that's what we encounter. We encounter other shelters, and we're attached to other shelters. And that's the cause of fearfulness. Back to Shamsundar's question online. When we have other shelters, then we're fearful. We don't, because that's shelter for us. How do you let go of what our shelter is? Because it means happiness, and it means vitality, it means who we are, and all those things. We don't let go. So we let go. Simplicity is you let go. But you take shelter of that which is substantial, sat. Nasate vijite bhavo nabhavo vijite sataha. From Bhagavad Gita chapter 2. We don't take shelter of asat, we take shelter of sat. That's simplicity. And consistently, at least we're cultivating in that direction. Consistently. That's simplicity. Okay?
Just one more question.
One more, I wrote them because it's 12 o'clock.
Yeah. Radhavana Prabhu, can you please go ahead and ask?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can you hear me, Prabhu?
Yes. Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji, for coordination. Yeah, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Our Guru Srila Prabhupada, Guru Parampara. Thank you for the wonderful class. The question is, we are seeing such, as you just mentioned in the class, the Lord is so merciful and kind to Vibhishana.
Yes.
And really demonstrates his causeless mercy. So, for practicing sadhakas for us, that compassion and mercy comes through our spiritual authorities, spiritual master and Guru Parampara, and we see that causeless mercy, deep compassion and love expressed. So the recent understanding I got is, while the spiritual authorities are bridge to Krishna, but they are also our eternal associate. It's not that once we get connected with Krishna, the spiritual authorities disappear. So it is life after life. It's fine to pray that I need association of my spiritual master or Guru Parapara. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes.
Life after life.
Yes. The spiritual relationships in general, they're eternal. They may look differently when we're in different bodies or different, stages of life, but the spiritual relationships are spiritual. And spiritual means Sat. Yes. Correct understanding.
Maharaj, I have one question, but not related to the current topic.
Okay, go ahead.
It mentioned about the Bhrigu Muni, that he approached first Lord Brahma, and he didn't offer his obeisances to Lord Brahma, and Lord became so agitated, angry with Bhrigu Muni, and then he approached Lord Shiva, and he used his harsh word to criticize Lord Shiva, and he also becomes so angry that he ran after him to kill him. But when he approached Vishnu, then even he threw his kick to the chest of Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu was even become so compassionate that my heart is so strong. I hope that I have not hurt your soft leg. So in that process, he was trying to find out who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead in that search. Is there any offense on the Bhrigu Muni side to act in those ways that he acted with Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva?
Our acharyas speak in the following way. It's twofold. One is the response of Brahma, the anger of Brahma and the anger of Shiva were inspired by the personality of Godhead in order to defer to Lord Vishnu. And it doesn't say this explicitly by our acharyas, but it's deductive that similarly Bhrigu doing what he did was inspired by the Supreme Lord. Now, if it was other than inspired by the Supreme Lord, if you neglected your father and verbally insulted Lord Shiva, then that's an offense. But given the purpose of Lord Vishnu being fulfilled, then it's not. No. Offense has a lot to do with intention. Supposing one inadvertently says something or neglects in doing something, is that an offense? It's not the same. So he was doing what he did because this was Lord Vishnu's plan to honor his devotees, but specifically to indicate the superiority of Vishnu above Brahma and Shiva. So everyone was acting according to the Lord's plan.
Thank you very much.
Intention makes all the difference in offense or not.
Thank you very much, Maharaj.
There's one more online question. Oh, do you have time, Guru Maharaj? Okay. This is from Austin devotee. Along with Vibhishana, the 4 ministers who came were also sheltered without any questions.
Yes.
Discussion happened only for Vibhishana. My question is, Vibhishana's family is also virtuous, so were they also protected and accepted by Lord Ram?
Yes, because his wife was aligned with Vibhishana. Yes. When an exalted husband, like Vibhishana was, becomes benefited and accepted by Lord Ramachandra, assuming that the wife is in alignment with her husband, she gets the same benefit. That's the Vedic system. Okay.
There's one question from Aradhita from Houston.
Okay.
May I ask Guru Maharaj?
Sure.
Okay, the question is, does one have to take 100% shelter to receive the mercy of the Lord?
Well, supposing you take 50% shelter or 10% shelter or 90% shelter, then that's what you get. Proportionate to you receive. Let me ask you, Aradhita, are you receiving mercy? And are you 100% sheltered? Are you submitting yourself 100% to the Supreme Lord? I would guess the answer to the first one is yes, and the second one is no. But you're getting, each of us getting mercy according. When you stand in the sun, supposing you have an umbrella over you, then you're not getting the full light of the sun, but it's bright because you're out in the sun. You get the idea. Proportionate to. Okay, we're going to end there. And very sorry for the technology glitch, but once again, can they see this on their screens? Or do you cut it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Tomorrow morning, 6:30 Central Time, same channel. We'll be discussing the same topic with Chinese translation. And the same slides, but with Chinese translations in addition to English translations. And the second is I will send to Chirag the version that you somehow was interrupted, so you can view it at your own leisure. And the audio recording you can listen to, etc. And we're crossing our fingers that we're not going to have more technology problems as we go forward. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai. His Holiness Romapada Maharaj ki
Jai.
Jai.
Jai. Thank you so much, Maharaj. And once you share the information with me, I'll be happy to share with our local group here. And all of our Zoom sessions are on our Facebook Live channel as well as our YouTube Live channel. So those of you that want to listen to Maharaj's class can always go back and listen to it. Next Sunday, His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj will be giving our class on our Sunday virtual feast program.
Hare Krishna devotees. Now we will have kids sloka recitation and realization. And Rekha Mataji will introduce the sloka. Her